Hey, Tom here. So this past week has been pretty tough for all of us, hasn't it? Because right now it seems like we've really turned the corner in terms of where we are in terms of political discourse, because there's a lot of Christians who are mourning Charlie Kirk's death. But on the other hand, we see Christians out there who are saying that Charlie Kirk is not even a Christian and that what he espoused has nothing to do with Christianity. And you think, and I think to myself, if we as Christians can't even agree on basic stuff, on things that we can be united over, which is a fellow brother being murdered for a political purpose, how are we actually supposed to engage in politics? And that made me think about how should Christians engage in politics? And what I want to share today is, for me, a spectrum that has been in my mind for quite a while now. And it's, for me, this endurance to engagement spectrum. Because we know that this world as a Christian is not our world. And while we're here, we take up the cross and we follow Christ. And there's going to be hardship. And there's going to be triumphs. And I use this endurance to engagement spectrum as a measure of how we Christians interpret these two passages. And in the first passage is from Mark 12. It says to render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. So you see the tension there, right? Because we understand everything's God's. But then how do we and where do we draw the line as to how much we want to concede to Caesar or the rulers of this world? And then we actually have this second passage, which is from Romans 13, which God tells us, let every person be subject to the governing authorities. So to the degree where you believe that the government is God's institution for us, you submit to it, or you say, you know what? To the degree where God allows these governmental institutions to be over us, we have a degree of flexibility to determine how much we submit to that. So for me, this enduring to engagement spectrum, and there's 5 different buckets I want to go over today, helps us to understand where we as Christians interpret these two passages. And by understanding where we stand, maybe that will help us know how to engage with other Christians and further other people who are outside the faith, so they can understand why we have the position that we have. So I want to go through this 5 different buckets, and I'll start with, from the one side, endurance. And here's where you actually have the Anabaptist and Christian anarchism. And if you're in this bucket, you would ask yourself, what if the whole system of government is so corrupt that it can't be redeemed? Should Christians just walk away completely? All right, so that's the first bucket. And the second one is called City of God, and that's a teaching from Augustine. And you want to ask yourself this question: what if we accept that all governments are flawed, but yet we still engage for the common good? Okay, so think about that. And the middle ground, which is the next one here, is 2 realms. It's kind of both enduring and engaging. And to assess where you are, and maybe in this one, is you ask, what if you try to balance both obeying the government where you can, Caesar, but refusing when commanded to sin, God's? Okay, and then the next realm, the next bucket is sphere sovereignty. And here's where you ask, but what if Christians aren't just called to obey or endure? What if Christ's lordship extends over every square inch of life? Okay. And the last one, which I put in here, is because, and it's called responsible resistance, is because I look at the current tensions, and you look at the secular history, and right now, a lot of countries around the world are unsettled. And here, we have our own situation where you ask yourself, but what if the government becomes so openly evil that it's even demonic? Do Christians have a duty to resist? Okay, so that's your spectrum from enduring to engaging, even to the point of violence. So if you think about Christian anarchism or Anabaptist, what you think about right away is the pacifists, the Quakers. or the Mennonites or the Amish who are living in their own little bubble. They're counterculture, counter communities, and they reject the system completely and they live on their own. So the good thing is they can follow God and follow his commands to their heart's delight, to what they believe is truly following after Christian teachings. And that's a good thing because they don't get adulterated by the political system. But on the other hand, if you think about what Christians are meant to do and meant to be in this world, they have no influence in the world. I mean, they will have influence to the degree where people look at how they live and say, you know what? I admire that, I respect that, and I want that for myself. And you'll join them, or you'll possibly model a life that's similar to that. All right, so you would choose this position as a Christian if you believe that the world system is irredeemably corrupt and there's no point salvaging it. You just want to live and endure until Christ comes. The next one is seated God. And you think about, and for those of you who are old enough, you'll remember Pope John Paul II, Polish guy, and he was aligning himself with the solidarity movement in Poland, and they were peacefully resisting the Soviet system, the socialist system that was prevalent in Eastern Europe, and they're peacefully advancing their cause of freedom, supported by Christian values of freedom for everybody. And the strength of this system is that you are very realistic about what you can do. I mean, that's why they're peaceful. And you slowly advance your cause in a realistic way as much as you can. And the challenge of this is sometimes as you're advancing your cause, you ally yourself with some systems and organizations of the world that are not always pure or godly. And that's a compromise where you think, well, do the ends justify the means? And they can be accused of this in this area where, although they endure, sometimes they have to kind of hold hands with people in the political realm. But as a Christian, you would choose this if you want to have responsible engagement, but you have no illusion about a perfect earthly kingdom. Okay, so two realms. And two realms. This position is actually where a lot of evangelical Christians stand. You can see that, for example, where they pledge allegiance, they join the army, they serve because they believe that that is their godly duty to help protect their citizens. And a lot of times it seems as if Christianity and patriotism are intertwined. You see those Bibles where there's a flag and the cross. That would be two realms. The good thing about this is they're very clear about where their boundaries are. They're very good citizens. They obey the laws. They follow, the government, what the government says. But at the same time, they also focus on expanding the kingdom. So they can be accused of being very nationalistic and not understanding that sometimes Christian beliefs requires you to actually not obey national laws or laws of the different governments, especially when they're doing wrong. And you would be in this bucket if you want to be a good citizen while keeping the church focused on the gospel. So in your mind, you're able to actually separate those two. All right, so now we move on to more the engagement side, and the one quote that really encapsulates this is from this, I think, Dutch theologian Kuyper, Kuyper, and he says, "There's not a square inch in the whole domain of our human existence over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry, mine." So based upon this quote, the premise is every square inch of life in the sphere of family, church, state, education, arts, everything belongs to Christ. And because you believe that, you engage and you build Christian schools, you have newspapers, you have hospitals, universities, political parties. So you build a parallel system that advances Christian values and Christianity. And this is where a lot of times the culture wars happen, because what we believe as Christians might be at odds with what culture in a secular world believes. And On the one hand, you have this culture war, and on the other extreme, within this sphere of sovereignty, you have Christian nationalism, where people believe that, hey, not only do I have to advance by building Christian schools and universities, hospitals, but we need to actually go into government, of course, which is one of the spheres, and dominate and take that over. And that can look like an extreme nationalism, where it could be theocracy or dominionism. I mean, I'm thinking very extreme. But you push laws that are explicitly Christian-based that support your belief system as Christian. But even then, I'm going to do an aside here, but even within Christian nationalism, you can be a Christian and also nationalist if you think that, you know what, I'm a Christian, and if you're involved with government, you can say, you know what, I'm going to try to influence the laws and the policies in a Christian way as much as possible, but not have to have it be explicitly Christian or be a Christian rule or Christian law. And that's more of a positive, affirmative Christian nationalism, as opposed to like this extreme one where everything is like, in a way, theocracy. And you would choose this sphere of sovereignty if you believe that Christ's lordship requires us to be in advance, breaking down the gates of hell and advancing the kingdom here on earth. Okay, and then last one, responsible resistance. And I add this in right now because, and if you think about Dietrich Bonhoeffer during World War II, he is a prime example of this. And he said that he believed that obedience ends when government destroys justice itself. In that case, resistance is the right thing to do, even godly. And if you think about what Hitler and the Nazis did during World War II, I don't believe he was on the wrong. He believed in his convictions enough that he stood and he fought with worldly systems to overcome evil in this world. So you can see that as a prophetic courage where he stood for his beliefs. But on the other hand, you can think, boy, that is very extreme measure that you're using political systems, violence even, that God might not even call for, because ultimately everything is God's. And in the realm of Caesar, you don't have to go that far, because ultimately God reigns supreme and he's sovereign. But you will choose this position if you believe that silence in the face of evil is itself evil. Okay, so these are the 5 positions that I've come up with that I think match with where we are today in terms of the realm of different positions that Christians take. And I have my particular positions, and I'll share that in the future. But if you believe that our ultimate goal is to advance the kingdom through a spiritual way, then you'll be more on the enduring side, and you will tolerate and accept, maybe to a large degree, the evilness of our governmental system. Or you might think, you know what, I need to engage because that's how God made me. I really need to be active in advancing the gospel, not just through preaching of the word, but also changing the culture around us. And if that's you, then go for it. I just feel that as Christians, we need to be united, and our goal is to not win politically in the end. Our goal is to actually be faithful to what God has called us to as Christians, and that is to preach the word. And for some of you, it might be more engagement style through actions and activity, and for some of you, it might be more enduring and just more by modeling how you live your life in a Christ-like manner. And wherever you stand, if you can keep in your mind that, especially as Christians, the unity of the body is most important. And it's hard because we're so programmed to see people who don't agree with us as enemies. And especially as Christians, we cannot have that position, have that view, because Christ says, pray for those who persecute you. You have to love your enemies. And especially if you're Christian, your Christian brothers and sisters are not your enemies. We're on the same team here. So whatever political position you take in, or whatever political position you take, just remember that we have to be united as Christians. And that would be the most powerful example and a witness to the world. But anyway, I hope this helps. All right, take care.